Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on which part of the world you're in, and a very warm welcome to viewers from all over the world. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the CEO's Chair is a unique program where we showcase inspiring stories of successful CEOs. We give you an insight into their mindset and discuss not only their challenges, but also help you understand their definitions of success and leadership. Today is a very special episode. It's our 48th episode, and we have another such inspiring story with us. Ishveen Anand, co-founder and CEO at Open Sponsorship. Welcome to the show, Ishveen.
Thanks for having me, Siddharth.
So Ishveen, first of all, thank you for making time for this. I know that it's been an extremely busy week for you as well. So we'll try and keep this as lively and entertaining for you as well as the audience as possible.
Thanks.
So Ishveen, just a few lines of introduction about you for the audience as well. You were born and brought up in the UK. That's where you did your early education as well. And you graduated from the University of Oxford. You moved to India for a few years after working in the UK to work in sports sponsorship. You then moved back to the UK, I believe, and then eventually to New York in 2014, which is when you founded Open Sponsorship. You were also named to Inc. Top 100 Female Founders. And you were also on the Forbes 30 under 30 sports list. So congratulations on all your achievements so far. I'm sure you've got, as they say, many more miles to go.
Hopefully.
No, absolutely. And I think if any of us and our businesses have survived the past year, I think everything from now is definitely going to be much easier than that.
Yeah, should be.
So Ishveen, just to start things off, you've been playing sports since a very young age. What exactly drew you to sports enough to want to do that for the rest of your life? Did you have a preference as far as individual versus group sports?
No, I think when I was young, I was just playing because I loved it. Fortunately, I was good at sports, and I suppose, now you look back and you're like, well, it was amazing. You spend all day outdoors and with people. It's so enjoyable. And obviously the skills it teaches you. I think it was only later on in life, once I was a management consultant living in London, that I realized that playing sports had been such a big part of my life. And now, maybe I was doing an hour every other day or something. And that's when I realized, actually, I'm really passionate about not just playing, but actually what sports delivers to you and what it makes of you. Personally, I don't think I would have been the person I am, have the personality I have, got into Oxford if I didn't play sports, because it taught me so much about being a leader, being a communicator, losing, winning a little bit. So I think I realized that actually it's just the sports industry, the sports as a whole, that I'm so passionate about.
And so you've been playing sports. Did you have a specific preference for any sport that you played as a child that you've kept in touch with?
Yeah, I mean, netball was my primary winter sport. And then cricket was my summer sport. But to be honest, if someone needed a player, I was always ready to be called, even if I wasn't very good at it. So, at university, I was on the squash team, on the football team, on the tennis team. I would just play everything.
Very nice. And so Ishveen's graduated from the University of Oxford, and she's worked a couple of years as a management consultant. And she takes a decision to move to India and work in sports sponsorship. How does that happen? Was there a catalyst moment, or was that something that you planned for a while?
Actually, full transparency, it took a minute because I decided that I wanted to work in sports. I started kind of figuring out how could I even make this happen. I didn't know anyone who worked in the industry. I had this friend who had originally been from India, and he was like, "Oh, I know this guy. He's got a sports agency in India. I'll put you in touch." That guy turn out to be my future boss. He sent me a job offer, like literally within a week. No, like we spoke on the phone once, sent me a job offer. And my parents were both doctors, fairly traditional. I'd say like over time, they're now definitely more modernized, but like fairly traditional. Obviously, I've done this like deep education. I'm 2 years in, and I completely understand it because I have a younger sister who's 11 years younger. And now I look at it and think, gosh, I was crazy. But so I'm, 20, whatever, 3 years old. And I turn around and I'm like, I want to leave my career as a consultant and move to India to be a sports agent. And they were just like, absolutely not. My friends, like, how could your parents control your life? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm Indian. Anyway, so it took me about a year to convince them to let me go. In the end, we actually came to India on a family kind of vacation, and my dad actually sat down with my future boss to be, and a guy called Jamie, and like spoke to him, and he was just like, why would you want to employ Ishveen? And like, she doesn't have any experience. Like, I don't. So it's actually a very funny, probably like only in Indian families kind of story where like they interviewed each other almost. And then, I think my parents really understood that I was kind of like, I loved my management consulting job. The people were amazing, but it's just not my passion point. So, actually, I came to India about a year after. But I'm glad I had that extra year in London in consulting.
I'm sure. And you came to India, I believe, 2011, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, the sports sponsorship industry was just about getting started. You probably got in at, not even the ground floor, just the basement, and people were still putting the nuts and bolts together. What was the experience like of working in India and in Delhi versus working in the UK?
Well, actually, so I landed on day one and like went straight to the office. I mean, I didn't even know anyone really in India. I had a couple of like extended family members and stuff, but went straight to the office. And our agency, so they called Commune. It was called Commune, and they did basically fashion and sports. And so Fashion Week was like kicking off. So like literally straight in the office. And then straight into Fashion Week, which, I mean, I'd been a management consultant, like Excel and Access and Microsoft Word were like what I was used to. And now I'm suddenly in the middle of like India, Delhi Fashion Week. And then a week after that, so that was more observing and just kind of helping out. And then a week after that, I flew to Mumbai, and my client was like Mumbai Indians. And that was like crazy. It was second year of IPL. So everything's still so new and fresh. And I remember my first ever proper meeting lasted from like 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning, which like unbelievable. But, it was a negotiation, and it was just, it was honestly like a different world. I think, the good things were obviously amazing exposure, really fun. You make of it what you can. I mean, obviously the bad things, like I do think maybe it's better now in India, but at that time, 2011, like there wasn't that much respect for women and younger people generally. And I still think like that's the case. You hear of like sons of business people, and then my friends, and they'll get in the boardroom and no one wants to listen to them because they're young. So I think like in England, especially in London, like the fact that you've got a job as a consultant means people respect you because of that. You don't need to validate yourself every 5 seconds, whereas I would never have to say to people, oh, I went to Oxford, or I'm like prove my worthiness in a boardroom in London, whereas I feel like I do. And I think also because it's like slightly in the sports industry, so could be a combination of like the industry change as well as the country change. So that was interesting. I mean, doable, but interesting. But it was an amazing experience. And then if you remember in 2000, oh, sorry, no. I moved to India in 2009.
2009, okay.
Okay, so second year of IPL, and the IPL moved to South Africa basically overnight. Correct. And that was the first time it had moved because of the elections. So then I find myself on a plane going to South Africa, and this is like a month after I've just moved to India. So it was all pretty amazing and unique, but hard work, but amazing.
No, I can only imagine. And I've lived out of the country for a long time as well. And I speak to a lot of people that when they come to India for the first time, I think the sense of chaos is something that either you learn to adapt to, or it's something that really throws you off. Yeah. Because, right from the traffic to everyone,
100%.
just standing really, really close to each other.
Yeah.
It is.
I actually always say that, like, my parents were really surprised I wanted to move to India, because as a child I used to come, and I actually hated it. We'd come like every 3 years. My mum's from Bhopal, so we'd go there. And honestly, like, it was just not enjoyable. Like, it was so different. And I was I'm quite westernized, but I think what really why I changed my mind was because I think when I was like maybe 19, 20 and I came on a trip, I realized, like, you have to just embrace the difference and realize that everyone is happy. Well, like, no one's happier living in like the $1 million mansion than they are in, like, wherever they are in the ecosystem. And so I think what I really truly realized was that the expats that would come to India and try and turn it into an England experience were really left unsatisfied. But if you came and you were like, okay, this is a different experience, let me embrace it for what it is, and let me not try and make sense of everything and create and be flexible, then India's an amazing experience.
And I think the key word here is experience. It's almost like going to the circus, or going out for a night. You don't really know what to expect.
Yeah, but I mean, that's in every country. When I moved to New York, like, the pace at which New York, the aggression, like, it's definitely not for everyone. But you have to make it what it is, versus turning around and saying, oh, I wish it was like London, or I wish it was like this. So
of course, no, and I love the fact that you brought up in your face New York, because that's exactly what it is. So fast forward to, I believe, 2014 is when you moved to New York.
So I actually moved in 2013.
Okay.
But I started the company like right at the end of 2014, early 2015.
Okay. So where did of course, I'm sure you must have spent some time getting used to the city, but where did the genesis of open sponsorship come from? What was the thought that sparked it?
Yeah, so I was actually doing kind of a lot of, so what I really loved about sponsorship, I mean, I loved a lot of things about sponsorship, but one of the aspects that I really was intrigued by was like the cross-border application. I remember I was in like one of the Cricket World Cups, and I was talking to Pepsi in London, the England team. I must have just been in a box with them. And I was asking them, like, why do you not use the rights from India Pepsi? Like, I think we'd signed Harbhajan Singh to Pepsi, and they had like amazing athletes. I was like, there are so many Indians in England. Why would you not use like Harbhajan Singh in an ad? And they were like, oh, well, we don't really talk to that team and we don't have that right. And I was like the whole inefficiency of it kind of didn't make sense to me. And then I was also working. So one of my biggest clients was Hero, formerly Hero Honda, now Hero Motorcorp. And they had a golf tournament I was working on, and then there was like a golfer there from England, and he was the marquee golfer. So he'd been invited over. He was being paid to come over and play. And I was talking to him, and he was like, it sucks. Like, I'd love to have got sponsorship, but like my agent is my like best friend who lives in London. He's never even been to India. And at that point, like, European golf was being played a lot in China and Dubai and Southeast Asia. And he was like, I basically spent my time in countries where my agent has no relationships. And so it really started occurring to me that like sports is such a global phenomenon, but sponsorship is like still about who you know, and you can't know everyone in the world. And so I was really intrigued by this idea, and I was exploring it. And then I suppose that's how, and then at that time, so 2014, like personally, I think we'd started using LinkedIn. We'd started using obviously things like Airbnb or Uber. Yeah, I was using Uber at the time. So there must have been a point when I remember being like, why? I love all these technologies that make my personal life easier. Why don't they make my business life easier? And then I was like, why is it not an Airbnb for our industry? And so that's really how it started. No,
very nice. And I think it's a brilliant concept. And for you to be able to create a platform that connects brands with athletes and even events now is absolutely amazing. And I'm sure that you've had a ton of athletes, and I met a lot of athletes myself, and they're probably some of the most hardest working people out there. what was their initial response like? Because they're also very, very busy, with their practice and their nutrition, and do they have time? And we'll probably get into this a little bit later in detail. But do they have time to actually create a social media presence? Are they inspired by the LeBron James and the Derek Jeters and now the Virat Kohlis of the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so sponsorship is a really important source of funding for a lot of individual athletes and even team athletes. Like here in America, you've got like lacrosse players or volleyball players who don't get paid nearly enough, right? And so they need to supplement their income. So there's two types of sponsorship deals. Like there's a sponsorship deal because you need the money. And then there's a sponsorship deal for like Kohli where he doesn't need the money, but he doesn't, but when he was up and coming, but he's still doing it because it's on Vogue, it matches with his brand, and it is money, right? And it is decent money. So the athletes that need the money, they obviously love it because it's a source of income. And whether they want to or not, unfortunately, in today's time, a lot of sponsorship money is tied to social media. Correct. So I wouldn't say that actually like every athlete loves having to post on social and like build a brand. And even if you look at like the really big athletes, they have teams of people who do all of that stuff for them, create the content, post it, whatever else. So I personally would say that like, I think social media is like a means to an end for most people. I don't think we necessarily, like I myself know, like it's something I feel like I should do. Sometimes I love it, but 90% of the time I'm like, oh shit, I should post on social. It's like, correct, not done that for a minute, right? Same thing as a company for us. So I would say like, I think there's a few people who love it, but a lot of people realize that social is, it's the new, it's a new success. If you used to be judged on on-field success, now you're judged on off-field success, which is social. So that's that. And then actually for all of our biggest athletes, not all, most of them, I'd say like 80% are signed up by agents. And so it's not necessarily that we are working directly with the athlete because, ultimately, as you mentioned, the athletes are super busy. Like, they're not looking, they're not the ones especially the bigger guys, they're not as incentivized to close these deals or use our site. So you could think of it as a bit like real estate where I might have the home, but I want someone else to help me sell it. And so agents love our site because they are able to essentially, like, it's the easiest way to get their job done.
Absolutely. And I think social is probably the easiest metric that, that brands can measure. When you talk about impressions and you talk about visuals and impact and so on. So, again, and coming back to the athletes as well, because they are the core of your platform. That's essentially the product that you're selling to the brands. If I had to ask you for two qualities that brand look for in athletes that they want to partner with, because it's a chicken and egg story, right? When there's an up and coming athlete, that's the time that he needs the money to put into his training and his nutrition and his team. And that's when he doesn't get the sponsors because he doesn't or she doesn't have enough followers. And when somebody gets into that 50 million mark, he has to fight off brands that are fighting.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some of the qualities that up and coming athletes can probably, hone themselves in this digital age?
Yeah, I would say, one is authenticity. So that's hard for an athlete to control, but it's important for them to know that like brands today really want to know, if I'm a pet brand and you have a pet, but you never post about your pet, then like you're not really authentic, even if you have a pet. So, you see a lot of athletes, like they'll post family pictures. It's now very much more about like, show your kids, show your life. If you love cooking, show it off. And so I think like there's a whole thing about like brands want to see authenticity. And so, it really like this idea that I'm more than an athlete, like I think before, and you still get like a few hater fans who are like, you should do nothing other than train and compete. But like that's largely gone out the window, and people are saying like, show me who you are, like show me what you do when your time is off. Like, do you meditate? Do you do yoga? Do you, whatever you do? So I think authenticity is huge. And then the second is like good content. So it's not frequency, but it is good content. So like if you can, one of our top performing athletes, he's a lacrosse player, and he basically takes a photographer with him everywhere, and he doesn't get paid a lot, but like his photographer is his friend, and like they go on trips together, and the quality of his content is amazing, and that helps him to get deals in the thousands, even though his social isn't very high. So I'd say like focusing on like good quality content, and if that means like finding a friend who is an influencer who knows how to post well, like take some tips, like learn how to use filters and figure out like how to do selfie videos and things like that.
No, and it's a scary time for being in the creator market, because you've got 10 and 12-year-olds that are putting out content like never before. So, if an athlete can't do that, and you're very right, because that's the product that they're selling. You may perform very well in a race or a match or whatever, but if you don't have the content to back it up, it becomes really difficult.
Yeah.
So are there specific sports that open sponsorship is now kind of focused on, or a specific geographical area, and you hope to expand that further?
I mean, our focus is still the US. It's the biggest market, is where the whole team is. But, the beauty of being a website is that you can literally like do deals for anyone, anywhere. So we recently had like a Malaysian or Singapore betting company send a proposal to Benzema, who plays for Real Madrid. So, both are on our platform. So I'd say like the beauty is we're everywhere, literally. But, we have quite a lot of Indian athletes actually. So, our focus is, I suppose, our intentional focus is still the US.
Okay. No, fair enough. Because of course, once you have your wins, then you can probably expand anywhere that you want. Yeah. I'd also take this opportunity, we've got quite a few people in the audience, to have them, if they have any questions for you that I can pick up towards the end of the conversation. So Ishveen, you talked about netball and cricket when you were growing up. Do you have any favorite sports and a favorite athlete at the moment? Do you get time to focus on sports outside of business?
Yeah. I mean, I do enjoy American football. I think it's a fascinating sport. Problem with American sports is they're so long. I mean, they manage to stretch like 40 minutes of play into 4 hours. It's unbelievable. So,
well, you shouldn't complain about that, because the sponsors are the ones that are extending the adverts, right?
Yeah, but technically that means that the athletes are playing sport more and have less time to do social media deals. So, but no, I mean, to be honest, I'm like a big sports, like if you put me in front of the TV and a sport is on, then I absolutely love it. I mean, I love track and field during the Olympics, tennis if it's a good game, so golf, Formula One, I find. So I'm kind of a big fan of a lot of different sports. I probably don't watch as much as I could. In terms of athletes, I mean, I definitely love like athletes who are doing good. So, the stuff that like Lewis Hamilton and Marcus Rashford are doing, obviously LeBron James here. I think using your voice for good is so important. And I think every athlete should be doing that. Even if you have 5,000 followers, like there's 5,000 followers for you or I is probably still our friendship group, or a little bit extended. For them, it's people who look up to them, right? Even if I'm friends with an athlete, I look up to them, I value their opinion. I mean, as we do to everyone. So I think like standing up for what's right and for what's good is just so important.
True. You also talked about following tennis, and of course, we are probably living in an era where we have the top three that have dominated the game for, between Federer and Nadal and Djokovic for over probably the past decade and a half. So one question that I wanted to ask you, because you're also surrounded by athletes and their teams and their managers, what do you think separates, somebody who wants to go pro versus somebody who actually makes a success of themselves going pro? Because you've got thousands, if not millions of people out there.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't really know, because I don't get involved as much on the non-business side. Like when you work in sports, you're basically, there's quite a big delineation, even in teams, between performance, like coaches, this, and then like commercial, so sponsorship. So I think it would be, I mean, I imagine it's a mindset issue. I mean, I was listening to this talk recently, and they were talking about how, like, to get to the next level, like, you have to, it's all about the power of the mind, and like being able to, you know, unlock a pain threshold that you never thought existed, unlock a vision threshold that like no one else had dreamed of. And so, you know, at the end of the day, like, of course there is a physical attribute, but you hear about it all the time, right? That like that player was, you know, has moments of brilliance, and especially in tennis, right? Places like tennis and golf where at one point in time, like, I'm sure Djokovic has been beaten by all of the people below him, but like continued performance, I think it's a mindset issue. I mean, look at Tom Brady. It's, you know, there's no way he's physically better than he was in his 20s or 30s, but clearly, like, the way he looks after himself, the fact that what he eats, what he sleeps, like, I think he sleeps every day at like 9 a.m. Like, you know, it's just I think it's the lifestyle, the mindset, the dedication to the sport.
And it is a lifestyle, right? Because you're dedicating your entire way of life for this one purpose. And I read an article recently which even talked about LeBron James, and he approximately spends $1 million every year only on his nutrition and his body. So, and, you know, and you see his fitness levels at the age of 36, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So just winding down the conversation a little bit, it's not easy being a founder. It's not easy setting up a startup. I know you're 6 years into it, and I'm sure every day, like Jeff Bezos says, feels like day one. So what advice would you have for somebody who's looking at, you know, starting out their own business? Would you recommend they work a couple of years in a company first and then do it, or just jump in with both feet?
No, I think it's so important to have, like, you know, we talked about validation before, but like as an entrepreneur, you definitely need to validate like why you, not only like the actual skills. So if I hadn't been a consultant, like, I would not know how to put together a great PowerPoint presentation. If I don't know how to put together a PowerPoint presentation as an entrepreneur, like, how do I build a deck? How do I build a pitch deck? How do I build a sales deck? Obviously, if I don't have industry knowledge, then how am I making an impact? If I don't have industry contacts, then I'm probably like never going to succeed. So I think working is so important, whether it's a corporate or a startup or whatever, but getting some inside knowledge before you kick off is so important. And then I'd say the other thing is like, you know, when people say like, you've been doing this for 6 years, I'm like, gosh, that is crazy to me. Like, I never thought I'd do anything for 6 years. You always think like Uber was an overnight success, or Airbnb. It was like, oh, you know, people talk about Facebook and they're like, oh yeah, like Facebook has been around for like maybe 5 years, and you're like, no, like Facebook's been around for 2003 was when I joined. So, you know, it's been around for nearly 20 years now. So yeah, I think people forget how long things take. And so be in it for the long haul, because if you're not, you will burn out, because the opportunity cost of being an entrepreneur, like, is really high, like time, energy, money, or, you know, all of that stuff. So
of course,
make sure you're really passionate for it, and realize it, you know, what you think is going to take 5x.
No, and especially when you have when you're just starting out as an entrepreneur, you probably have your peers that have stuck to their jobs and now are, you know, doing ridiculously well for themselves. It can be very dispiriting as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially in management consulting, where, you know, where the year-end bonuses are, you know, are just ridiculous. So I have a question from one of the audience members. Tanya is asking that you worked in the UK and in India and in the US. What was the biggest difference that you found in the work cultures between all three countries?
So the UK is, there's quite a lot of differences. I would say, so you could probably just let's take internal and then external. Like, so internal is like how the company works, and then external is how you deal with clients. So I think the UK is, I mean, as the whole culture is like a little bit more like straight. You kind of, there's not that much BS. Like, you do your stuff and you kind of leave, and
very direct. Very direct.
Direct, better work-life balance, for sure. Probably lower salaries than America, generally. But just like cordial or whatever else, right? And then externally, clients are definitely more like, you'll end a meeting and they'll tell you like, no, this is not for me. Like, don't waste your time. Okay. Let's move on, right? So that's, and meetings are short, they're to the point, right? India, oh my gosh, like.
You talked about 7-hour meetings, so.
Yeah, so I mean, like, people shout, right? Like, there's a culture of like, I can shout at my subordinates, which obviously like you would never shout at anyone in England.
That's changing though now. I mean,
is it?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's because, you've got so many international brand names that are coming in, and you've got so many people that have worked in other parts of the world as well. So it's very difficult to get away with stuff like that anymore, thankfully.
Okay, good. So, I mean, those are like, I just remember like the rudeness, but at the same time, like, it makes you grow, right? You at least know where you stand, because you're like, okay, and then it gets out, like there's no aggression afterwards. So as I said, like, I'm sure it's different now, but like at that point it was, the attitude towards young people, towards women, was like a little bit different. But what I really loved is like, it feels more like a family. And I don't know if that's changing as well, but like everyone, that kind of attitude of like, everyone's your family at all points. Like, everyone adopts you as like my godfather in India.
Whether you want to be adopted or not.
Yeah. He like made himself my godfather, and it was amazing, but like it was through work. And so I think that's really interesting. Like, even client meetings, like you spend 80, I don't know if it's different now, like you'd spend 80% of your time talking about like BS, and then maybe 10% of the meeting, right at the end, you'd be like, so should we talk about work? And then, which means really long meetings. And I remember like, I was talking to this one person, and he was like, I basically sit in meetings that do nothing from like 9 till 7, and then I have to work from 7 till midnight. And I was like, shit, like, which is the opposite of England. So, but it's fun, right? Like, it's kind of, it's fun to know people inside out and to be really like close friends with people. So I think that's India. And then I'd say America is probably like a little bit of mix of the two. Like, people are not so straight. They'll definitely always take meetings. They don't really tell you what's going on. No one really wants to say no. It's a land of opportunity, but things do get done and don't get done. They're probably more willing to give new things a shot in America, which is nice. It's not so regimented. And I'd say the same thing with clients. Like, it's a bit of a mix. Like, I'd say there is a bit more of a wine and dine culture. It's not to the point where you're like, come to my family home and I'll adopt you, but it's fairly close.
Not everybody gets an invitation to the weekend barbecue unless you're really, really close.
Unless you're really close, but it still exists. It's still possible, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of people, especially in the States, they want to see the effort that you put into the project or the process, or even to get a meeting with them. I don't know if that's helpful or not. But great answer. Thank you. I've got Anne who's asking that, did you or were you ever in a position where you had to choose between a passion and a paycheck? I'm currently struggling with that decision. Did you struggle with it?
Luckily I didn't. I wasn't very money motivated at all. So I've definitely taken passion over a paycheck multiple times, like every day still. But like, not very money motivated. I'm also very fortunate that, I suppose I'm not like it's not like my parents give me a lot, but I've never really had to think about money, but I also don't spend a lot. So like if you care about like buying Gucci handbags, then, you know, it's a tough call. But like I really didn't, you know, when I was living in India, like spent $20,000 on 20,000 rupees on rent a month and like eight rupee paranthas for like lunch. So it was like very cheap. So you also like don't need as much money. But I think what you have to realize is, are you okay with the drop in lifestyle that you may have? If so, then great, don't think about it. Don't do it for like ego reasons, because who cares how much you make? So I think there's obviously like living circumstances. And I do think, I like to have this phrase, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like I knew when I left consulting and took this gig in India, I was like, well, like my job will probably let me come back. And I actually kept it, I almost made it sound to myself like, oh, this is just like a temporary hiatus and I'm going to come back to this job. I was never going to come back, right? But like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You can just go back to your old ways. And honestly, like happiness is so important in life, like so important. So I just think like pursue what makes you happy every day, because you know the money will follow as long as you're not like, you know, obviously destitute kind of thing.
Thank you. And I think the last question is from Rishi. Who's your favorite athlete that you've met and who's on your wish list to meet?
Who's my favorite that I've met? Oh gosh, it's really tough. Well, one of our investors is Baron Davis, who's like an former NBA player, NBA All-Star. So he invested in us. So he obviously gets a shout out for being my favorite. But if I was going to say like, who am I did meet, well, when I was working in India, I did meet, you know, I spent time with like Dhoni and like other like Sangakkara, who I thought were brilliant. But like, I think I saw them more as like peers at that point. In terms of like fan moments, I met Kevin Durant and that was pretty awesome. Also, I suppose like these basketball players have this aura because they're so tall. So they seem like unworldly to you, almost.
I used to meet Shaq all the time in New York because he used to come and stay at the hotel that I worked at, and he couldn't be nicer. He was just like literally this gentle giant that was walking around. But
he's so tall that you're just like, oh my gosh, yeah.
He's like, I think 7'1" or something ridiculous.
It's amazing.
So that's pretty much it, Ishveen. Anything that we've left out, any words of advice that you'd like to give, you know, to the audience, to people that are starting out on their own or, you know, looking up to you at what you're doing?
That's very kind of you. Work really hard. Like, honestly, there's no substitute for, I think you said it as well, like work really, really hard. And like in today's time, like you can, I mean, look at what you're doing, Siddharth, like you can do so much by yourself. Like you don't need to be backed by a company. So, you know, to the person who asked about passion or paycheck, like, can you make your paycheck a 9 to 5 and do your passion in the evening, right? Like I'm lucky that I'm doing it during the day, but at the same time, like some days this is not my passion, right? I'm like running a company versus like doing sponsorship deals or like changing the world. But the point being is that like there's so much time in the evenings at the weekend. Like a lot of people live for their paycheck and spend their extra time doing what they love. So, you know, when people come and meet me and they're like, I really love marketing. And I'm like, well, do you have a blog? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, how do you really love marketing? Like, just because someone pays you, you can't love marketing. You should be living it and breathing it. So, you know, think about what work hard doesn't just mean in your job. It means in your life and your extra time. Great.
I think that's great advice, Ishveen. Once again, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you're in London and you're probably there with your family and locked down because of the lockdown. But hopefully I look forward to meeting you sometime in person, either in New York or in London, whenever.
Absolutely.
Or if you're the next time you're in India, you know, let me know. all the best to you to open sponsorship. I wish nothing but a continued success for both of you. So
thank you so much. To you too.
Thank you all. And thank you again for everyone that's watching. Take care. See you. Bye-bye.